The American Indian Movement, or AIM for short. So what is AIM? Well, AIM is a Native American civil rights organization or group that was founded in 1968 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The flag to the right here is the AIM flag. The American Indian with a hand forming a peace sign represented the strength, resilience, and activism of indigenous peoples. The black represents west, the yellow represents east, and the white represents north, and the red represents south. This represented that all directions, all tribes would come together to form something that could change their rights. Also, if these colors were formed in like a circular pattern, that would resemble health and healing. So what is AIM's origin? Well, the termination policy became law in 1953, and this policy was meant to encourage tribes to leave reservations and go to the cities in the West. The termination policy basically said that they didn't recognize tribes, but this policy led to a lot of Native Americans feeling out of place. There was a lack of education, and they received racial profiling from the police where in those cities that they were told to go live in. This led to the American Indian Movement being born. Dennis Banks and Clyde Bellecourt were two Ojibwa men who had met in prison. They founded AIM with the help of Eddie Benton Van Eyck, Pet Ballinger, and George Mitchell. The original goal was to help Native Americans who had been displaced by the American government, to just give a voice to Native Americans, but it ended up being way bigger than that. This led to the AIM Patrol, and this patrol was how Native Americans treated, how they were getting treated by police and government. So this patrol monitored how Native Americans were treated by both police and government. They did not use physical force to help with their cause, though. They would try to limit the interaction between natives and the police. Even if a crisis did arise, they would offer a resolution for an alternative. Later in the 1970s, they would actually use walkie-talkies because this would make sure that they kept track on each other no matter where they were. They always knew where each other were. This patrol led to a reduction in the number of arrests. There was a study that was shown that one of the chiefs said that usually it was 6 American Indians, Native Indians, were arrested per week. But with this AIM patrol, none were arrested. So it helped a lot. Right here we have the AIM button, and they would wear this on their shirts to advertise, to show people that they were in the American Indian Movement and they were causing a stir. Right here on the left we have an advertisement. It says, "Support the American Indian Movement." And this was to help gain power and support from other people. I also have a clip of the AIM theme song, which I think is very powerful. It sends a very powerful message because these Native Americans used this as to represent their bravery and their courage and like a family. So here it is. One of AIM's most ambitious actions to date was the Trail of Broken Treaties. So after so many broken promises that the government had made to Native Americans, AIM decided to do something about it. In 1972, hundreds of Native Americans went to Washington, D.C. to give the government their 20 points. The 20 points was a list of things that Native Americans wanted completed. They weren't even that big of things. They could even be small things, like they wanted to be involved in this, or they wanted to be included in things. It was for and I quote, reconstruction of Indian communities and securing an Indian future in America. But Nixon, he was the president during this time, dismissed the 20 points, but this protest for civil rights was taken seriously, and there was finally attention drawn to the fact that Native Americans were fighting for their right, just like and it's what they deserve, just like every other human being. Because of this, Nixon got rid of the termination policy and provided funds to Indian tribes. So instead of denying that Indian tribes existed, he finally said, okay, they do exist. This was a step in accepting Native American culture. The Wounded Knee Massacre was also a big step in civil rights. So in 1973, an Indian man by the name of Bull was killed by a white man. This caused a huge riot. There wasn't any justice being served. So for 71 days, there was a standoff from police and Native Americans. They both occasionally exchanged gunfire, but in total, 2 Indians were killed and 14 were wounded. And during this time, Banks, one of the major leaders of AIM, was arrested. This led to more protests, and a lot rose out of this. AIM met together and formed the IITC, which was the first indigenous organization to receive the official recognition of a group. Something else that also came out of this was the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. This gave Native Americans the freedom of religion. They could have whatever religion they wanted to, and before this, they could not. To the right, we have American Indian Movement, Remember Wounded Knee. It was such a big point in their history that they would also wear this. I have a quote from Dennis Banks right here, and it says, "What we did in the 1960s and early 1970s was raise the consciousness of white America that this government has a responsibility to Indian people, that there are treaties, that textbooks in every school in America have a responsibility to tell the truth. An awareness reached across America that if Native American people had to resort to arms at Wounded Knee, there must really be something wrong. And Americans realized that Native people are still here. They have a moral standing, a legal standing. From that, our own people begin to sense pride." And I think this is also really important because Native Americans really wouldn't use violence towards other people during this time because that just wasn't their way to do it. So to resort to arms at Wounded Knee, again, like he said, there must be something really wrong. And there's a lot of significance to AIMS. I think it's very important. But the American Indian Movement was and is very important for several reasons. The first being it advanced Native American civil rights. AIM was an effective movement that pushed for rights and brought the attention of the U.S. people on Native Americans so that Indians could also have a future full of freedom and hope in America. It caused the passing of many civil rights laws, one of them being in 2007, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. This was a huge stepping stone because it gave the individual and collective rights of the indigenous peoples, including their ownership rights to cultural and ceremonial expression, identity, language, employment, health, education, and other issues. And these are my sources.